Well, I've been trying to come up with some new Christmas jokes because my material's all pretty old. And I didn't do a whole lot better, but I've been noticing this year a lot of sort of updated things about kind of retelling the Christmas story with some new technology. Have you been catching any of those online? Like a little girl on Santa's lap at the store, you know, Santa says, "What do you want for Christmas?" And the little girl says, "Didn't you get my tweet?" Or a little boy a little bit later in the line, he says, "I uploaded my list to Dropbox. Didn't you get it?" Kids of today. Another thing I read online, Santa knows, you know how Santa knows if you've been bad or good? He's read your Facebook posts. He's up to 6 billion friends now. He's getting a lot of information. Rumor has it that Santa is replacing Rudolph, who, as you know, guides his sleigh, with a GPS sleigh guiding app. That's right. And another rumor has it that Santa has replaced all his reindeer with a fleet of drones. That's kind of sad.
That's really sad.
The wise men today, it's been suggested, would be called the 3 Wi-Fi men. They would order their gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh on Amazon and have them sent directly to Mary and Joseph. They'd use GPS to map their trip, but then they'd likely lose their signal in a dead zone en route to Bethlehem and get lost in the desert. And actually, you know, the wise men were actually firemen by occupation. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's because Scripture said they came from afar. That's pretty lame, I know. I think I missed that. Well, it's hard to find good Christmas jokes. I challenge you. I'll take any you got. Well, we're into the Advent season, and I always like to really approach it as, how is this an adventure for us in our process of coming into our most Christed selves, our highest selves? Because to get the meaning out of those old gospel stories, these stories about the birth of Jesus in a manger, in a stable, all those wonderful stories, how do they apply to us? We need to look for the meaning for us in our journey, our adventure. That's what Advent's about, the adventure of our becoming more, of our coming up a little higher, realizing more of our potential, our freeing ourselves from burdens, and stepping out into life in a fuller way. There's always in this process of Advent, we talked last week about conception. It starts with that. The angel comes to Mary, the Annunciation, and says you're going to conceive a holy child. And we talked about how we all have moments of conception when we get a new idea about ourselves and what's possible for us in our life, what's possible for us to become. After the conception, what's next? And that's what I thought we could focus on a little bit today. There's always a period of waiting, and that's my title, is Those Who Wait. You know the old idiom, good things come to those who wait. There's a power in waiting, and waiting is a part of any birth. Any birth. There's the period of gestation, there's the period of waiting, there's the period of Mary, in the scripture it says Mary treasured these words about her bearing a holy child and what he would be, the prophecies that she was hearing. She treasured these words and pondered them in her heart. A time of pondering and waiting. That's not an empty time period, it's a time of growth. It's critical to the growth of any new thing, to the birth of any new sense of ourselves, to any becoming process. Waiting is a big part of it. Lots of waiting in the Christmas stories. Mary's waiting for this prophecy to come true, that she'll bear a holy child. Joseph is waiting for what will happen, waiting for guidance and how they're to live. Mary's kinswoman Elizabeth is waiting. She too is told that she's going to have a child in later life. Zechariah. The shepherds are waiting. They see angels, a choir of angels telling them of a birth. They go to see it. And they're waiting. They're excited about that. Wise men have been studying the stars. They're coming from afar. They're waiting to see if this becoming process, this birth is going to be really true and happen. They're waiting to see how it comes into fulfillment. Simone Weil, the great French mystic, said, waiting patiently in expectation is the foundation of the spiritual life. Waiting is just as much a part of our growth, our birth into higher selfhood. We wait in prayer. Isn't prayer a lot to do with waiting? We have a desire in our hearts, an intention, a vision, and then we ponder it and we nurture it and we wait. It's an important part of the process. Waiting is prayer in a way, so I think of it as like holy waiting. And there's a certain kind of characteristics of this kind of waiting that makes it Advent waiting, makes it more powerful waiting, holy waiting. We have to wait, it's really a sort of a requirement because guidance comes to us in this becoming process as we're going to come into greater fullness of self. It doesn't come all at once, does it? It comes little by little. Think of your own growth throughout your life. Did you get the whole package right up front, with a download? And boom, there it was, the new birth, the growth into all what's possible for you, that new vision. For some reason, the image came back to mind of that old TV program when I was a kid from Bewitched. Do you remember Bewitched?
Sure.
And when she wanted to change something or make something happen, she did that really nifty little twitch of the nose and boom, transformation, new birth, new being. And, some of you don't remember that. Jesse, probably a little before your time.
Oh no, I
remember
know
Bewitched?
Yeah.
Well, if only transformation always happened that way with a little twitch of the nose. But no, guidance comes a little slower than that to us. It comes as we have need of it. It made me think about years ago when I was doing some ESL tutoring, English as a second language. Some of my students were Honda employees, and I got a little tour of the Honda plant. This was many years ago. But they were very excited about their manufacturing process, which they called just-in-time manufacturing. Things came through the assembly line at just the right time, not ahead of time, because things would get blocked up and stockpiled. That wasn't efficient. It comes to us just in time. Often that's how divine guidance comes to us, don't you think? It comes as we have need of it, step by step, as we move forward. We can't stop. We have to keep kind of being open, receptive, ready to receive that divine guidance, but it comes to us little by little. So how do we practice Advent waiting? If we agree it's a part of every birth, every growth of any new thing, including us, as we're becoming new. It isn't idle sitting around waiting, watching TV, just sort of wishful thinking. It's a more powerful kind of waiting than that. So one of the first characteristics I think that makes it more powerful is the waiting of expectancy. There's a sense of expectancy, watchfulness. It's a very active kind of waiting, a kind of alert waiting. Our antennae are up. We are waiting as one who knows powerful forces are operating on our behalf. Like an expectant mother. We even use that word expectant. You are expecting things to happen because you know there's an energy working within and all around you. A power and presence is working on your behalf. Advent waiting is like that. It's expectant waiting. It's rather like incubation. We know that word. When a baby is born too soon, they're in an incubator. I remember in my previous church I served, one of my congregants, my youth director, had a baby quite premature and was at Children's Hospital in an incubator, and I visited there, I remember, and she was there at the side, nurturing, pondering in her heart, watchful, alert, standing guard, praying throughout that process while that baby grew into greater strength and fullness of life. I think we do that mentally, spiritually as well. There's a kind of mental, spiritual incubation that's a part of our waiting process. We know new life is growing in us, a new idea of who we're becoming, new possibilities for us, and we're pondering that in our hearts, and we're supporting that lovingly, supporting ourselves lovingly in any way that comes to mind for us. How can I support this growth in me? We honor it. We're watchful. We're expectant. I've always been a fan of the work of Joseph Campbell, as I know some of you have as well. And I remember reading about some of the biographical material out there about him, that there was a period of incubation for him. He even used that word before he really found his niche to do his work and his writing and his teaching as an expert on world mythologies. As a young man, there was a period of time where he lived alone and cheap, he said. He said at that era you could live alone and really cheap if you made good choices and knew how to do it. He lived alone and cheap in a small cabin in Woodstock, New York, and he read voraciously. Mythologies, religious texts from all around the world, just reading everything that came to mind for him. And he had encounters, he stumbled upon books and met people during that era. He happened to stumble upon the book Light of Asia. It's a biography of the Buddha. First thing he read like that. It fed into this growing wisdom in him. Things find us, don't they? It comes to us as we have need of it, just in time. A process, growth process. And he talked about that time as an important time when he was waiting. He was, quote, incubating his destiny. Incubating his destiny. It's amazing how that happens. And then the call from Sarah Lawrence College came out of the blue, and the teaching post that became his tenured position, and then the books, Hero with 1,000 Faces, and everything else that followed. But before that, there was that time of waiting, of incubating, of nourishing, and supporting, honoring. Sometimes it's hard to honor it when you're waiting and you're not seeing much fruit of it yet. Would you agree? You're in the middle, you're not seeing much evidence of what you think is the direction you're heading in. There's not much evidence of it yet. But it's so important to honor it, to nourish it, to support it while it incubates, while it grows. So expectancy. Second one is surrender. There's a surrendering to higher process, natural process, higher process, where there's an awareness that we're cooperating with, following guidance and cooperating with higher forces. We are not calling all the shots. There's more mystery at work. Mary told the angel Gabriel, she didn't know how this was going to be happening for her, but she said, let it be with me according to your word. I don't know how that's going to work out. I'm not married yet. How am I going to bear a holy child by the Holy Spirit? But let it be with me according to your word. We do the same thing. We ponder, we reflect, we don't see the outcome, we don't know how we're going to get there. We're not given a roadmap. I've never been given a roadmap in life, have you? It's not, it's more like we kind of go as far to the edge of the light we see, and then there's more light, and we walk to the edge of that light, and onward we go. So there's a kind of a surrender to that process. There's expectancy, there's surrender, not forcing, but going with, letting new life come, letting guidance come. There's patience. That's the third one, patience, as a part of this Advent waiting, this holy waiting. And I think of patience, this is my definition of patience, ability to tolerate the unresolved. Ability to tolerate the unresolved. That's what I think of as patience. And that can be difficult to do when things are confusing and messed up or lacking, or we made mistakes, or we just don't see the path before us at all. It can be hard to tolerate the unresolved. It's a capability we can develop more fully, though, and I think we do develop more fully as we get older. Do you agree? That we can tolerate the unresolved more because we've been through it before. We've been in murky places before where we didn't know how things were going to go or where we were going to end up, and we walked through. In all healing work, in all growth work, there is this time of things being confusing and unresolved, and we have to be able to hang in during those times. Any kind of transformation. I was reading again our good friend Eddie Watkins Jr., wonderful musician who's visited our church here and been to Columbus several times and become such a good friend. I read again on his website his transformation story of where he was about 10 years ago. He was music director of a CSL church in Seattle, and he was in a bad place in terms of health and wellness. He has a story of his transformation on his website if you want to read it. He was over 350 pounds. He had really, really bad eating habits. He was on medication for high blood pressure, was on blood thinners. taken sleeping pills to be able to sleep at night. His good friend Karen Drucker, who we also know pretty well, was one of the few people who told him when she was visiting his church that she was worried about him because of the obesity, that she didn't want to lose him. And it was one of those little wake-up calls. We get little bits of guidance as we're moving along, especially if there's some changes we really need to make and we kind of know it, but it hasn't really come into full awareness yet. We get little guides, we get little guideposts along the way. So that was a little guidepost. And then he happened to see a program on plant-based eating and how that was so much healthier in so many ways and more ethical, felt better to him as an animal lover. And he decided to think about that, move in that direction, a vegetarian, a plant-based diet. He stumbled upon a movie. This happens all the time. We stumble upon things. Books find us, films. A film I've not seen, but I remember reading a lot of reviews about it. It's a film called, I think it's Sick, Fat, and Nearly Dead. Anyone heard of the film?
Yes.
Yes, it's changed a lot of people's lives, I guess. Eddie saw that. It fueled his transformation. He changed his diet. He did all kinds of research on totally plant-based diet. This was 10 years ago. He's also discovered a lot of herbs and things that he works with. He's very keen on black seed oil and oregano, and I don't know what it is. You can read these things on his website. But and all the time he was doing this work, he was doing his music. He came out with a CD, When You Believe, right around that time, a couple of years into that process. All things are possible. Anything is possible when you believe. He's proof positive of that now. 10 years later, he's healthier than he's been in 15 years. He's lost over 120 pounds. He's CD after CD coming out, joyful, vibrant, no medications of any kind. His most recent doctor visit, the doctor said, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. It isn't anything doctors recommended for him. He made his own path. He found his own way, step by step, just in time. Just in time. Amazing, the transformation. And the waiting that was involved in that was a lengthy period. Anyone who's gone through a health change like that can resonate with what's involved in that. There's a fairly lengthy period of waiting when you are cultivating this new sense of self, new habits, new lifestyle. There's not a lot of evidence of it yet, but you know you're working it, and you're honoring it, and you're honoring the growth that's happening in you before anybody else even is aware of it. That's that important gestation time, that waiting, that incubation period. That kind of waiting is critical in any kind of healing work. Any kind of healing work, there's a lot of waiting, a lot of waiting. I was reading, watching an interview with Judy Collins. You all remember Judy Collins and her marvelous voice. And she's still out there. I don't know what, she's in her 70s now, I think, but still touring and singing. And she's done some writing, and she's had some deep sorrows in her life. She wrote a book called Sanity and Grace about surviving the suicide of her son, her 33-year-old son, who had struggled with alcoholism and depression on and off over the years, and the deep sorrow of that, and how she worked with it, how she overcame, how she moved through. There's an interview with Bill Moyers about it, and she talked about how you make every effort to show up minute by minute. And then she said, and then, quote, the wonderful thing is the healing is there someplace, and it starts to take place, sometimes in spite of you. Sometimes in spite of you. Oh, it's okay. It happens. We're in a technological world. And we can see it as a wake-up call to transformation. She talked about healing is ongoing, and that's true whatever kind of healing we're doing, if it's physical, if it's mental, if it's emotional. She says, dinner with a friend, sharing a laugh, doing your job, working, singing, taking a nap. Healing is ongoing. It's always going on, and there's a lot of waiting in the process. There's a lot of waiting and trusting with expectancy. There's something wonderful. The amazing thing is the healing starts to take place. I've found that a lot with healing, haven't you, in your own healing work, that it almost sneaks up on you. You're not really aware you're making much progress for a while, and then all of a sudden you realize, like Judy Collins said, she had a moment where she found herself laughing over a restaurant table. She was out with friends, and the sound of her own laughter in her ears startled her to hear her own laugh. We can be startled by the amazing transformation that it can occur in spite of us, or when we're not even watching, or we're not even aware it's happening. There's a lot happening as we wait, because there are powers, there are energies at work on our behalf at all times. Waiting with others is an important part of how we wait, and we make our waiting more potent. Mary's first impulse when she finds she is to bear this holy child is to go and stay with her cousin Elizabeth for 3 months. That's the first thing. She wants to go and wait with her kinswoman, who is also to bear a child. They wait together. There's a writer, Henri Nouwen, who said, these women created space for each other to wait. They affirmed for each other that something was happening that was worth waiting for. And he calls this a model of Christian community. I like that idea. I think it's what we do in our church. I think it's what people do in any church. We wait. We encourage one another as we wait. Whatever prayerful work we're doing, whatever intentions we're setting, we are holding the high watch with and for one another. We are waiting with expectancy together. It's not idle stuff. This is important encouragement and support for one another. We help each other wait with expectancy, aware there are powerful forces at work on our behalf. So we wait with expectancy, with patience, with surrender. We wait together. And finally, the most important part of our waiting, as a part of this adventure of becoming more fully ourselves, we have an awareness of source. Awareness of source. I think that's probably the ultimate, the key thing about Advent waiting or holy waiting is the waiting of expectant mothers, the waiting of people being transformed like Eddie, or recovering from terrible illness or terrible sorrow like Judy Collins. There's an awareness that there's something doing the work beyond just us. There are mysteries at work, there are powers at work on our behalf. That's the source, that's the deep source from which the healing energy comes, from which the transformation comes. Jesus knew this and taught it always. It is not I, but the Father within that does the work. That's the source. That's where the energy came from. That's where the power was. And I think it's so important for us to remember that our egos get so out of control. We think we're doing it all. And yet, if we look back on our own lives and what we've come through, I think we'd have to acknowledge that we really don't know how to plan our way through our growth processes. Just though you don't know how to birth a child, you don't know how to plan your own growth, your own healing. Have you ever planned that and plotted it yourself? No, we are guided just in time. The guidance comes to us little by little, and we move through because of this source we are deeply connected to. That's where the guidance comes from. We don't know how to plot our way through life, so we better have our antenna up and alert for the guidance. The God positioning system, that's our GPS, our God positioning system from within, to guide us moment by moment. And so that's why we nourish our God connection by membership in spiritual communities, by prayer, by meditation, by oneness in nature, by anything that nourishes our awareness, deepens our awareness that we are one with God. As we do that, we are deepening that connection that will bring us, moment by moment, the guidance we need as we walk through, as we wait, and as we move toward fuller selfhood, coming into more of our Christed selves, as Emmett Fox says. Scripture promises, this is an old one from Isaiah 40, those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. I practice holy waiting, knowing God is at work on my behalf. Let me say that once more, and then you can join me in it if you like. I practice holy waiting, knowing God is at work on my behalf. Together? I practice holy waiting, knowing God is at work on my behalf. Let's take that into prayer for a moment and affirm that truth within. We can wait with expectancy, with patience, with joy, because we know God is at work on our behalf, now, always, moment by moment, lighting the path before us, opening doors of opportunity, filling us with healing, renewing life, guiding us with that deep wisdom rises from within us. How grateful we are to know that we walk through life guided by the power and presence of God. And so we can wait in faith, in hope, in peace. And we are grateful. And so it is. Amen.